Alright guys, it's Monk here. So today we're going to try making some dub, and I'm going to sort of show you and talk through the process of how I sort of make things sound dubby, I suppose. So I'm going to go ahead and open Ultrabeat, which is the drum machine in Logic that I tend to use the most. I don't really use it as a machine though, I just use it as almost storage for all my drum samples. So in here, like, you obviously have the drum kits it comes with, but then I have packs that I've made myself of samples that I've either, like, all these I made myself from recording samples on my Zoom. 2020 drums, that was last year. I had a good sort of explore of Splice and some other places to get new drum samples that I liked, and I built basically some drum banks that I've stored and saved in Ultrabeat. So I'm going to go ahead and open the trap hats I think I use most often. I always start with the hats because they're going to be the most consistent percussion that's going through your loop. So that's the easiest to sort of time without time, if that makes sense, which it doesn't. But if I put a hat on the beginning of every beat and then I highlight all of it, copy it over, back a bit so it's in between like that. Yeah. So now the hats sound like this. And then what you want to do for the dub, you don't have to, but a lot of dub uses this technique. Copy and paste over like that. And while you've got these highlighted, you see I've got every other highlighted, I can go down to velocity in the bottom left here and bring that right down. And then play. So that's giving us that nice rhythm, which is classic of dub and reggae. So I'm going to pick a better hat sample than that because I don't necessarily like it that much. Might go with that one, it's a bit gritty, could work well for it. I'm just going to put on an EQ and take out a little bit of the highs. And bring the bottom in as well. Cool. Then I'm going to copy and paste that whole channel, and then this is going to be my snare track. What I'm going to do is just take the MIDI and put it on the second bar, every second bar, if that makes sense. I can delete all them, and then if I open up, I'll turn off the EQ for a moment on this channel, open up Ultrabeat again, and then I'll go to, I've got a dub and reggae snares bank that I've made in here. And pick a snare. It's quite a nice side stick one. I think I prefer that one for this example. On the gain, I'm just going to bring the snare up a bit. Cool, and then a bit of EQ. That'll do for now. It's good when you're creating not to worry about the mixing too much. Like, I always sort of do a bit as I go, but the bulk of it you want to do at the end because otherwise it can interfere with your creative process. So next I'm going to copy that channel again, same as what I just did. On this one, I'm now going to drag all these that are on every second beat onto every first beat. I'm going to go into Ultrabeat and I'm going to change it to a bank of my kicks, which I think I was using some garage kicks I had. Get some of the low end in there in the EQ. Going to bring its gain down a bit. And at this point, when you're doing the kicks, you want to decide what kind of dub you're making. So if I'm just doing something like deep and heavy, I'd probably keep it like this kind of thing here. Or if you want it to be more of a dancey one, like steppers, means you're going to have to go with a 4x4 rhythm, where you have it on every kind of beat. So double that up again. Six. Now we're making a stepper. I'm just going to turn that kick down a little bit more. The next thing you'd want to do here is then start to apply some effects. So a big part of dub is the reverbs, really. So the first thing I tend to do is set up like a sort of standard reverb, like on a bus, send, hit X and it'll open up this. And you can go put a reverb on one of your sends. I actually for ages was just using Space Designer, so I'm going to use that again for this because it does have some Spring emulations in it. I think it's this first one. Yeah, so I use that one for my sort of bigger reverb sounds. So I use that one for my more sort of standard reverb sound. Like, if you don't know, so with dub, Spring Reverb is the type of reverb that you want to be going for. That's the classic reverb that people like King Tubby, Lee Perry, they use their physical Spring amps in their studios. And in these emulations within Space Designer, you've got Old Spring there and Old Spring there. They're slightly different sounding. This one is my favourite. So we're going to use that for the sort of more spacey reverb that sounds like that. Then what I would do is create another bus and send to bus 2, which will come up here as aux 2. And on this one, I want a really splashy like Spring Reverb, like the classic splashy sound. And for that, I have this plugin called Springs by Audio Thing. When you first open it up, there's this white noise. All you have to do is just turn it off there, or turn that down there, because what this is doing is emulating the sound of Spring amps, so like there'd be a bit of noise involved. So it's there if you want that authenticity, but personally, if I'm going to add noise into a track, I'd rather be in control of it, so I'll use a separate plugin to do things like that. Right, so on this channel, I'm going to turn the 1 down so we can just hear what this one's doing. You can already hear that splashiness, but there are some ones that are more like what I'm looking for. That's got a good splash to it. Because it's on a send as well, we don't need any dry signal on the plugin, so I'm going to turn the dry down and I'm going to whack the wet all the way up. We can bring it down on here now though. And I might take the lows out of this. So here you can basically shape the reverb. You've got like an EQ to shape sort of what frequencies you want that reverb to be in, and I just used it to take out a lot of the low frequencies because they're going to muddy up the mix quite quickly. So now we've got 2 reverbs set up, a spacey one and a splashy one. What I do at this point is copy over my snare track. So I've doubled it up. Then in one I'm going to delete 2 and 4, and in the other I'm going to delete 1 and 3. So now you've got them on alternating tracks. One of the tracks I'm going to have the spacey reverb on and turn the splashy one down. The other one I'm going to have the splashy one up but the spacey one down. Cool, so that you've got some alternation in your snares already. I would then copy the second set of snares over, and I'll probably delete 4 on this actually. And then on the other previous one I'll delete the other, because you don't want to have 2 where 2 tracks is playing the snare at once, so it's going to be a lot louder. And on the snare 2, which this one's going to be, I put them in order and number them. On Snare 2, I'm just going to add some delays in. So I'm just going to use the standard Logic Echo for this. And I found with dub, what works best is the dotted delays, 1/16 or 1/8. It depends how quick you want it to be. We can listen to both. Not a fan of that one. I think I need to feedback up a bit more. Let's go on 132. I might actually put it on a longer one. Yeah, so we've went with 1/8 dotted, and I put the feedback up because you want like a long tail of the delays happening, and then I bring the wet down so they don't sort of interfere when the next snare hits. What I've also done is brought the splashy Spring Reverb down a bit on this delay one, and then maybe up a bit on this one. Might actually put an EQ on that reverb as well, so we're just getting the high. And now we have variation to the snares, if you see what I'm saying. Also on the hats, we can add a bit of reverb. I probably wouldn't go with a splashy one for those. I'll just go with the Logic stock one. Cool, yeah, so now we've got a pretty dubby sounding drum loop, I'd say. So once we've got a drum loop, it's probably time to add the bass in. With dub being such a bass focus, like dub's made for sound systems, obviously, so the sub bass and the bass just in general is probably the most important part because that drives the whole song. The drums and the bass, as long as they're working, everything else is kind of just decoration, to be honest, and it's all like creating a soundscape around that. But the drums and the bass is your foundation. It's what people dance to. It's the rhythm that people can feel. So just trying to decide what synth to use here for it. If I just go with Serum, you don't really need anything fancy going on when it comes to basses in dub because it is all about the sub. So I'm just going to turn off the oscillators, just stick my sub on, whack the sub up to full. Well, I've got a bit of sub. I might actually stick a bit of noise coming in as well, just to add a bit of grit to it. So then distort that. Bring the mix back a bit. Right, because the latency is really bad while I'm recording, I'm always seems to be like half out. So I've just recorded in this tiny little rhythm thing. That should work. Just as an example. Yeah, that'll do. So then got a bass line going, which really there are methods to it. Like with original dub reggae, a lot of it will be a bass guitar rather than a synth. So if you listen to them kind of bass lines, which is like on the beat, and then they kind of like do double time at parts. I'm explaining that really badly. It's not kind of my area of expertise, but you can sort of see what I mean here in this section where suddenly the notes are going double. It kind of like catches up with the rhythm again. If you listen to like dub reggae bass lines and then just try and mimic them, you'll soon see they're not that difficult to get a hold of. Obviously they can vary in complexity. I'm not saying that all reggae bass lines are really simple, but they shouldn't be too difficult for you to grasp. And once you have like a bass line down, we have a good foundation going. So what I'm just doing there is side chaining the bass to the kick. This is especially important when you've got two things that are in the same frequency range, and the kick and the bass are obviously going to be very close together. So if you sidechain compress your bass to the kick, that means the bass is going to duck every time your kick hits, which is going to help the kick to hit through and sounds more punchy and present in the mix. The next thing, you're probably going to want some chord stabs. A lot of the time this would be like a guitar or an organ in original reggae. In a lot of dub, especially digi-dub, we're going to be using synths, but usually we're still using like analog synths and things like that. It's still like an older vibe even though we're making electronic things. So I'm going to go ahead and use retro synth for this because it's going to give me that kind of old like analog style of synth sound that I'm looking for. We go keyboards maybe. So I'm actually going to go with this Neon Fifths preset within the retro synth for this, and I'm just going to record some, well, I'll just record one stabbing because of the latency. It's going to be easier to just record it in one noise in and then arrange it in the arrangement view. Yeah, so we've got that there, and then in the piano roll we're going to want it to go on every offbeat basically. Yeah, like that. Now it sounds like the tail on that is going on for a bit longer than I want it to, so what I'm going to do here is come in here and you can see the envelope, and I'm going to drag this in a bit. So what I've done there is I've shortened the attack a bit so it happens quicker, and I've turned this, which I think is the decay on there, but I'd usually be using the release, but it seems like the release is already at the bottom, so made a much shorter sound there. I'm actually going to add a bit of distortion. I'm going to run it through Decapitator, I think. So not distortion, this is saturation, which is essentially distortion, just a subtler version. And that's going to want some of our reverb on it, so I'm going to add a bit of the big one. And just to see what it sounds like, we'll put a bit of the splashy one on too. And then if I want to make this sound even more sort of vintage and analog, I have a free plugin here called Noise Retro from Denise, and this is just going to add like a layer of noise on top of the sound. If you can hear that, so it's just like a white noise burst that's happening every time the synth noise happens. Then you've just got some filters. That sounds cool to me. Let's hear it in the mix. And I might move the last one just up. There maybe. Yeah, that's cool. So at this point we have like a really good foundation. That's like the main part of the whole thing. This is probably where you then add a melody. You could add a sample, like some live instrumentation or a synth line. You probably want some melodic content. But for what I'm just showing you today, we're just doing like the raw sort of like minimal dub production technique. So the next thing that would probably happen if you have those chord stabs going constantly is the chord is then going to like dub out and delay over the track. So I've doubled it up here, and then on this second part I'm going to delete all of them apart from the first one, and I'm going to copy this track that has the chord on, delete the first on the second track and the second on the first, so you can see what I mean there. And on this we're going to add some echoes on. I'm going to add some of those dotted delays that I love. Right, whack the feedback up on that. Maybe 1.4. No, I'll go with 1.8. And then we just listen to that, what that's sounding like. Yeah, so that's classic to then have the reverb tail like running over the track. You'd probably then start to automate the snares and the hats and things, so the effects are sort of changing over time as they would if someone was doing a live dub mix on a desk. Other than that, there's sort of like the main things like on the stabs. Yeah, so don't be afraid to like mess with all the effects a bit, add automation, all them kind of things. That's the thing I love about dub is like once you have that foundation on, it's all just messing around with effects and plugins to create these bizarre, trippy soundscapes. So I hope you found this video useful. That's just sort of a basic overview of making dub in Logic. If you found it useful, then drop a like, subscribe, all those good things, and I'll see you in the next one. Big up.